To start, I want to take us back to 2017 when Universal Pictures made their monster movie The Mummy with Tom Cruise and Russell Crowe. The idea with this was that Universal was going to start making a bunch of monster movies or rebooting the monster movies that they own the rights to. Unfortunately, this movie failed at the box office in epic fashion, so this version of the Monsters verse that they wanted to create was shut down. Then we fast forward by 3 years to 2020, right before the start of the pandemic, and Lee Wannell's film The Invisible Man was another chance for Universal to go after the Monsters verse. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it. Elizabeth Moss is in it, and it is fantastic. It is a smaller scale film, and it is excellent with the story and the scares too. So now Universal Pictures has some confidence with their reborn Monsters universe for films, and Lee Wannell as a director has confidence as well. He has 3 films under his belt that have all been successful: Insidious number 3, Upgrade, and The Invisible Man. Leading next to January 2025 and the movie that we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're talking about Wolfman. Let's talk for a minute. I went into this film very excited for many reasons. First of all, I love all the monster movies that Universal owns the rights to. Also, I am a big fan of Lee Wannell. I loved his movie Upgrade. I loved the movie The Invisible Man. I loved the original Saw movie. I went into this very, very excited. Also, the fact that it was being described as being very contained in only a few locations. It had this setting of being in the middle of nowhere and being during the middle of night, so it would be this ideal eerie setting for a wolf/werewolf story. So where did this movie go wrong? My score for this movie is a 6 out of 10, and it's a complicated rating for me. And before with being all negative about it, let's start with the pros for this movie. First, it's definitely going to be the main 3 people of our cast for this film. You have Julia Garner, who is great in everything she's in, from Ozark to Inventing Anna. Then you have Matilda Firth playing the daughter. She especially is great in this movie. And then we have Christopher Abbott, who plays our Wolfman in this movie, and he is known from the movies Poor Things and It Comes at Night. The next really great thing about this movie is the story. And here, Lee Wannell co-writes a really interesting script with some very interesting ideas here and themes of fathers and sons, as well as mothers and daughters, and not trying to repeat the problems of the past and passing it on to the next generation. Really cool concept here. And the beginning and ending tie into each other in this movie in a very, very cool way. Another thing that I really liked, the setting, middle of nowhere, the woods, an abandoned house and farm. Absolutely perfect for this kind of a story. And the sound design. The sound design was very cool and very eerie. It's kind of that process of demonstrating how our main character is becoming this other creature. And here are the cons. I'm really bummed that we're going to get into this part now. The movie is a little bit too contained. I understand that we want to keep it simple. In a lot of ways, you can make things practical and keep your budget controlled, but there is definitely a little bit too much, or such a thing as too much containment. And it was a weird feeling that I couldn't shake after I started to feel that way. This horror movie leaned into the story quite a bit. The ending of it was just kind of a little flat. There were also some creative choices here that I just didn't understand. What is so frustrating about this movie is that it has kind of a reverse problem that horror movies usually have, if they have any problems. And that is, the horror part is usually really great, like the style and just kind of the scariness and the jump scares and all that are there, but then there's not much of a story, so it doesn't really stay with you, and it doesn't really maybe entertain you as much as some of the other horror movies that have great stories along with the scares. See Smile 2 from last year. That one was messed up and interesting and a good story and just twisted and had all the horror elements in there too. That was a good balance. In this case, while the story is really wonderful, the horror and style part of this movie leaves a lot to be desired. Didn't love the music. The design of the creature was also different, and it really lacked the horror part of the horror movie. It wasn't that scary, and a lot of it just felt strange. But enough of the negatives. Now I want to get into a little bit of the trivia and background of this movie. This is a Blumhouse Productions film. Ryan Gosling was originally set to be in the movie, and it was going to be directed by Derek Cianfrance. They had previously worked together in the movie The Place Beyond the Pines. In 2023, Lee Wannell took over as a director, and he brought on a lot of his crew from The Invisible Man onto this project, including the cinematographer, the editor, and composer from that previous film. What I really want to know, and what I'm curious about, is How much of this film was Leigh Whannell's original vision, and how much was he forced to continue developing from what had already been worked on by Derek Cianfrance and Ryan Gosling? This film feels like a mashup of something already cooking, and then Whannell was brought in to try to fill in the gaps wherever he could, and ended up just being a mess. Another eye-popping detail for me was this movie cost $25 million, which is surprising considering how most Blumhouse films max out at a budget of $10 million. This also makes me assume that a lot of that budget comes from what was already being developed from the version of this movie that was supposed to star Ryan Gosling and be directed by Derek Cianfrance. And because of this larger price tag now that had accumulated, I'm assuming Blumhouse and the studio Universal did not give director Leigh Whannell the usual carte blanche and free range to fully do what he wanted to do with regards to the making of and having the final cut of this film. I understand Blumhouse and Universal's point of view and their obligations, but the film feels to have creatively suffered from that, if that is the case. After saying all of this, though, it is important to remember that this film with a $25 million budget needs to make $75 million before becoming profitable, which is doable for a January-released horror film without much, if any, other major film competition for the month. It's a horror film too. People love horror, so I'm going to be curious to see a month from now how this one actually plays out at the box office. If you check this one out, I would love to get your take, and if you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you're getting this podcast episode, as it really helps the program. Wolfman is currently playing in theaters now and should be available on rental by mid-February before eventually making its way to streaming around the month of April on the Peacock platform. We have a great year of new movies and shows ahead of us, along with some recommendations of some great classics too. Looking forward to getting into it. Have a great time at the movies, and as always, thanks for listening.